Okay, this recording, right? Yeah. All right, everyone. I think we're mostly here. I hope you can all see, and we'd love to see some faces. So those of you who don't have your video on, go ahead and put them on. Oh gosh, I want to welcome you all here to this Zoom gathering in honor of Michael Keeling, who was a man so loved by his family and friends. For those of you who've never met me, I am Christine Keeling Taylor. I'm Michael's niece in California. This is my husband, Kurt Taylor, and we're just delighted to be hosting this event today. In this very challenging season for us all, the family are especially grateful. I know Angela and Anna and Richard are especially grateful that you would take this opportunity to join in today to celebrate their dad's life. And think of it, 3 different continents. Isn't this amazing? Just so good. Anna and Richard also felt that Father's Day was a perfect opportunity to do this, which I agree. And especially so since there's a second great-grandchild due tomorrow, right? So, not yet arrived. We know Michael would have been just delighted to welcome this new life into the family. So what an occasion this is. I am truly honored to have been asked to host this, and Michael meant a great deal to me. What an uncle he was. As a child, we would visit England from Rhodesia, and a highlight for my sister and I was always going to see him and the family in Guildford. And she may talk more about this, but it was a special excitement to be invited to in his veterinary practice. So you'll hear more about that, but I'm sure it's shaped both our medical careers. I was really struck by his love of plants and his beautiful garden, and I was just always amazed that he could grow hibiscus in an English garden. I remember noticing that when I was a child. He would drive us to see Mima, my grandmother, his mother, and I was always a little terrified at the speed he drove on those English country roads, those narrow roads, but we made it there safely, and that was always a lot of fun. And in later years, in England and in Cape Town, he would thrill us with his stories. We're going to have everybody muted here. I think we're just having a look. Here we go. Yeah. He would thrill us with his stories of growing up with my dad. My dad was the eldest. He called him Jansen. My dad called him Mitch. And I would hear lots of stories about their lives as they grew up as boys, and stuff that my dad had somehow forgotten to tell me about. So I got the lowdown from Michael. And then an interesting thing happened when he moved to Cape Town. My godson, Nick Miller, called me one day and said, "You know, there's something interesting." He said, I'm serving with my church. That was Christchurch, Kenilworth in Cape Town. And it turned out to be the church that Michael and Angela were attending. And he said, "We have this program called Feeding the Hungry." And he said, "There's this man, Michael Keeling, who's joined the group and is working with us in the mornings." And I was like, wow, that's my uncle. So that was interesting too. And not long after that, I was there for my godson's wedding and staying with Mike and Angela, and got to actually do the serving with them in the mornings. We made the sandwiches, and we took them out to the folks in the very poor area locally. And it was wonderful just to experience Michael in that role too. So I really appreciated that. Lots more stories I could tell, and I'm so looking forward to yours, but I just truly loved my Uncle Michael, and it really is a great privilege to be facilitating this today. So let me just explain a bit how we'll move through the memorial. We're going to ask you to keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. And while we'd love to see everybody on video the whole time, I completely understand if you need a few minutes to leave for a bit during the gathering. Feel free to do that. Just turn off your video, keep yourself muted, and when you come back, turn everything back on. Most of you know as well, there's a chat function that you can use if you're having an issue, technological or something you need to tell us. Go ahead and do that as well. So first of all, I'm going to call on Angela, and then Richard and Anna, and probably then Martin and a couple of others who've asked to share. And then we'll open it up for everyone to speak. as they will. And please know, whatever you say, it's going to be a blessing to the family, to Angela, to all of us. It's going to be wonderful. And when it's your turn to speak, I would ask you just to speak slowly, speak into the microphone, and we just want to hear you clearly. And remember, both tears and laughter are quite acceptable. So I'm going to share a few opening and closing words that Angela and I have discussed. And this time of remembrance is being recorded, so the family will be able to have a copy of it afterwards. So as we begin, I just want to mention that there are really two purposes to a gathering of this kind. The first and most obvious and foremost is that we want to celebrate Michael's life and the very good gift he was to all of us. We want to reflect on the whole of his life, and we know that the invaluable ingredients that you're all going to add to this will just give us a much richer understanding of who Michael was. And the second reason we come together is really important to grieve together. We are going to share our very real sadness and the fact that we love this man that we've lost. He will be missed, and life will not be the same without him. It's important that we grieve together as an extended family, and we have representatives from Michael's family, Angela's family, John, my dad's family, and of course Anne Pollock's family, and it's wonderful to have you all here. So for those of us who, like Mike and Angela, hold a faith experience, have a faith in God however we see God, we do believe that physical life is not the end. And we think that Michael, when he took his last breath on earth, he actually took his next breath in the loving presence of a gracious God. And that gives us tremendous comfort and hope. And particularly for his loving partner, Angela, we know that that comfort is so important. I'd like to turn now to Angela to speak. And Angela, we're going to unmute you. And what I want to do, you are now unmuted, and before you start speaking, I am going to show you on my screen the first picture that I found in my dad's archives of you and Michael when you were 8 years old and he was 10 years old. So this picture, which is a lovely black and white picture, shows Angela right next to Mike, and then there's two other people in the picture. One girl is Diane, who was the cousin, and then Anne, my auntie Anne Pollock in the picture. So I'm going to pull that picture up and share my screen, and then we'll have you talking. Just get that here.
Where's the picture?
It's coming. Sorry, I'm not quite there yet. Let me get my share screen going here. All right. And I'll bring it up here. Can everyone see that? Yeah, so there's Mike lying on the grass, and that's Angela next to him when they were 8 and 10 years old, respectively. All right, and the dog Judy, Anne Pollock, and Diane, the cousin. All right, Angela, you're on.
My mother and I had to come down to South Africa, clutching a suitcase each during the war, because we were in the Middle East, and the Middle East was rapidly becoming German. And we arrived in Durban, and there was no room for refugees. And so my mother wired my father, who was in Turkey, and said, proceeding England soonest, which in fact would have been 3 years' time, but she didn't know that. And he wrote back and said, get in touch with the Keelings. He is chief accountant in Shell, and they're in Cape Town. My father was actually Mike's godfather. He had been in Egypt when Mike was born and was friendly with his parents. That was before my mother's day. So she didn't know them. So we got on a train and arrived very dusty, very dirty. 2 days later in Cape Town, we were met by Mike's mother, Auntie Glad, who became a very important person through my life and driven to her house in Claremont, where we were greeted with a huge spider hanging in the front door. And I could see that it wasn't a real spider. My mother couldn't, so she had hysterics. And I thought, I like this place. Whoever's here and whoever's hung this spider is somebody I would like to know. And the somebody I would like to know is Mike. And the somebody I would like to know, after we'd lived with them for 2.5 years, they went to England. We stayed in South Africa for a while, and my mother married a South African because the war split up a lot of marriages, and hers was one of them. And so we became South African. And the Keelings were very English, but we stayed in contact. And it was a very loose contact. But I saw a lot after I married and went to live in England when I was 24, I saw a lot of Auntie Glad. And Uncle Eric died sometime after that. And I used to go and see her whenever I could, but I never went on a Tuesday because that was the day that Mike used to have off, and he used to go and see her on Tuesday. So I didn't see Mike. I thought it was much better for her to have 2 visits rather than 1. And so I didn't see Mike for a long time, but we were always friends, always knew each other. Through his mother, we always knew what the other one was doing. We both got married. We both had children. And then Anne, Mike's older sister, and Mick, her husband, had their 50th wedding anniversary in East London in South Africa. And phone rang one day in Devon where I was living, but I had a flat. My mother had died and left me her flat, and I had a flat in Cape Town that I used to go and squat in every now and again for a while, for several months. And the voice on the other end of the phone said, "Do you have a spare room?" And I said, "Yes, I do have a spare room." And he said, "Are you going to Mick and Anne's golden wedding?" So I said, "No, I'm not, because I will just have seen them and given them my present. And I haven't any money, and I can't get on a plane without money." And so he said, "Well, can I come and stay with you in Cape Town for a few days? And they are coming down to Cape Town, and they will take me back to East London with them." So I said, "Certainly you can stay for a few days." And that was the first time I'd seen Mike occasionally over the years, but not much. And when his youngest nephew heard that I wasn't coming to the wedding, to the golden wedding, he sent me a ticket and said, "Of course you're coming, your family." So in fact, I flew to the wedding, and we went and spent a weekend on the Wild Coast after the celebrations were over and so on. Select little group of family went and stayed on the Wild Coast. And that was it, as far as Mike and I were concerned. From then on, we were linked. And 2 or 3 years later, his wife found out about us and threw Mike out. And we got together, went and stayed with John. It was my 70th birthday. And we went and stayed with John, had my 70th birthday together in a hotel in Suffolk, Bury St. Edmunds. And then we came and lived out in South Africa, where we were for 20 years. And Mike is now not with us anymore. And thinking about it, it was the right thing to happen, because he was going to be 90 in September. He had lost the sight of one eye and the other eye was nearly blind. He never complained. He wasn't that sort of person, but he was finding life difficult, and I knew that. And he also didn't hear very well. Well, neither of us heard very well, which led to some very funny conversations. And
his back was broken.
Sorry?
And his back was broken.
And his back was broken. He had fallen in the bathroom and he couldn't get up because he had fallen awkwardly behind the loo and broken his back. I went and got help, and we got him into a chair and we managed to get him into bed. And although he went on for some time afterwards with the broken back, he could walk, but it was always painful. So life was not fun for Mike anymore. And he never, ever complained, but it wasn't fun. And at the end, I think he knew he was going. And last night, he had a nurse who came nurse aide who came every evening, put him to bed, spent the night with us in case he got out in the night, which he did frequently. And I got out with him and she never ever heard him, but that didn't matter. She was there. And that last night, she said, Mike is coming through because he's very uncomfortable in bed. And I've suggested that he sits in his chair for a bit. And Mike, who had eaten a hearty breakfast every morning and then gone to sleep, and his way of dealing with ill health was always to sleep through it. And he came into the sitting room, sat in his favorite chair, and we chatted a bit, and I said, have some soup. And he had some soup, and he had a nachi, tangerine, and then he went to bed. And it was a happy evening. We hadn't had happy evenings for a little while, and that was a happy evening. And in the night, I woke up, and he had uncovered himself, and it was quite cold. And so I covered him over, and I woke up again at about 5 in the morning, and he was in the same position, uncovered, as though he was trying to get out of bed, and I realized he had died. And I must say here that my son Martin and his wife Saida came to the flat. They helped me through that day, brought me back to Simon's Son with them, and I've been here ever since. I don't mourn Mike. I miss him. I'll always miss him. But I wouldn't want him back because he had lived a happy and long life and he knew exactly when to leave it.
Thank you so much, Angela. Really appreciate that. All right. Richard, you want to unmute yourself?
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry, hear what you said?
No.
All good. Yeah.
All
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. What do I feel about my father? Well, relationships between fathers and sons are always complicated. Very much so. And I have good and not so good memories of my father. And when I looked back on the times where I really felt close to him, there were really only two periods, sadly. One when I was a young boy, and I used to join him when he was doing his rounds as a vet. In the morning, he would visit farms and treat farm animals, and in the afternoons and evenings, he would have a surgery for pets and small animals. And I spent a lot of time with him when he was doing this. And I would watch him go to a pig farm, and we'd walk out into the filthy, stinking field where a dead pig lay. And it was bloated and swollen, and he, without really blinking an eyelid, would take a scalpel and slash open the belly, and out would roll a mass of stinking intestines, swollen and distended, and he'd look at it and say, well, this pig died from this or that. And the farmer would be satisfied, and he'd write it down in his report and all that good stuff. And this was, to my mind, admirable, even if it did stink. It was these times that I really enjoyed with him. He was in doing what he loved, which was being a vet. He really did enjoy it. And he was content and peaceful and in this profession. But I have to say that when I became a teenager and our lives became much more complicated, I was not so close to him. And when I moved away from home at the age of 23 or so, and then moved to America, I would say that on the whole, I probably spent maybe in his company in the whole of that period, right up almost to his death, no longer than a few months. It's not like we weren't in contact, although there were long periods where we were not in contact. But what changed to make me feel closer to him, and to many extents to feel that it was a sort of redemptive period, what changed was Angela. Angela was the person that, in my opinion, allowed him to start living as a full human being again. Because I strongly believe that the bulk of the central part of his life, he was not really who he wanted to be. He was not with the people he wanted to be, and he was not in the land he wanted to be. He wanted to be back with his sweetheart from his childhood, and had been feeling that way, I am convinced, for decades and decades. I don't believe he ever really let go of that. And it wasn't until he was able to recapture that for those last 20 years of his life that I believe that he opened up and became, to my mind, a much happier and much more well-rounded person. And I, without having to make any effort, found myself drawn closer and closer to him. And by the end, when we were communicating regularly via Skype and the visits I made to South Africa, I felt I had recaptured that childhood warmth that I felt with him. And for me, that was the most precious gift that I could have been given. And I want to thank you, Angela, in person, for being the person that gave that to me. And I am really very, very happy that that happened. So I regard my life with him to have been ending on a very successful note, and I'm glad he lived the long life he did. I'm glad he lived those extra long years with you, Angela. And the miseries and the harder times that everybody faces during their lives, those have sort of receded now, and I have a much, much, much warmer, very, very pleasant, heartfelt feeling towards him. And I wasn't convinced that in the past I would necessarily feel that. Now I can. So that's important. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you. Anna, can you unmute yourself?
You can unmute her.
Oh, I can unmute you.
Excuse
There we
me.
go. You're unmuted.
That's better. Thank you. Oh, Hello, everybody. Oh, I've lost all my pictures now. Here we are. Thank you, Richard. I understand exactly what you were saying there about Dad and the way that he made our childhood in many ways a sort of happier time possibly than the middle years of his life. I agree with you there. Many people have said to me over the last 2 weeks, you know, what a wonderful man he was, what a special man he was. I mean, old school friends of mine have rung me up when they heard the news, saying, you know, how much they loved the time they spent at our house when we were children. What good company he was. And of course, to me, he was all those things. And then I think as he grew older, and there was that patch in the middle of our lives when he moved slightly out of our lives and we didn't have so much contact with him. But then he came back into our lives in a huge way as a loving father and a grandfather and a great-grandfather, of course. But I've so many lovely memories of him from our early childhood days. I mean, of him just really enjoying life, playing boogie woogie piano, which he absolutely loved and was extremely good at. I mean, I don't know if you remember that, Angela, but he was fantastic at boogie woogie. He loved walking on his hands. He was extremely athletic. He used to walk up and down our back garden on his hands, which of course all my school friends thought was absolutely fantastic. And he was, of course, a very good hockey player as well. And we spent many hours at the weekend and in the evenings at the hockey club in Guildford. Other happy times was our summer holidays. We had one totally mad holiday where we set off to drive to Yugoslavia, as it was then, several thousand miles with no money at all and a crate of fruit in the back of the car. But actually we had an absolutely fantastic time. And of course there are all the many years we went to Spain as well, which he loved. And though he did spend the last years of his life a long way from England, we did miss him actually, because, you know, by then I appreciated his role in our lives as a grandfather as well as a father. He was so happy with you in South Africa, Angela, and had the opportunity to do new things and make new friends and develop new interests. And he was where he wanted to be. And of course, one of those new interests he developed was poetry. And I would like to read one of his poems, which I think sounds just like him. I can just hear him saying this, and it's also so true. It's a poem called The Living Room. One day they will have seen the living room where I'll have been, the empty chair where I'll have sat, the footstool and the this and that, the television I'll have watched while knocking back a tot of scotch, the pictures I'll have bought at sales of sheep and trees and hills and dales. They will have gone away and said, a living room is never dead. And I think we can all say that about Dad as well. He'll always be a part of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And it'd be great to get a copy of that poem that we can attach. That'd be wonderful. Thanks so much.
Everyone.
Martin, are you available?
I'm very much available, Christine.
Fantastic.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's fantastic to see everybody, or hear everybody, know that you're all part of this. So I just want to, I mean, obviously I knew Mike only really in the last 20 years of his life, when he joined us and joined my mother living in South Africa. He was basically a force of nature. He arrived, we really knew very little about what was about to happen, but suddenly Mike was there with his doggerel, poetry, his constant jokes, his swimming every day. And he suddenly burst into our lives. The first we really, my wife Saida and myself, were really aware of them was when they came up to visit us in Pretoria. And it was an awkward moment really, because we didn't quite know how to deal with this. It was a little bit like having teenagers visiting, except they were septuagenarian teenagers. And we didn't know where to put them exactly. So Saida, being a good Muslim, prepared two options. One was a double bed, one was two single beds, and we basically left them to decide. And of course, you know exactly where they went, and they didn't move from there the rest of their lives. I'm just going to mention two very, very brief vignettes, Christine, from our time with Mike, which I think summarizes to me what Mike meant to us, and to Simba and Zara, who he was basically their true grandfather. Firstly, we were in Cape Town. We'd parked in one of the car parks by the waterfront, and I don't know what would happen. I think we'd lost our ticket, our exit ticket. And Mike and I decided that basically car park, the exit gate of a car park basically works on weight. So the two of us thought, right, okay, if we both jump together, we can probably get this bloody thing to open again. And so Mike sort of, with his normal sort of singing along and rhyming all his words, and I went racing out of the car and jumped up on this thing. Of course, it didn't open, and we ended up having to go and apologize for making complete fools of ourselves at the desk, and got ourselves out. The second was similarly a car incident. Mike and cars will always be associated in my mind. As someone earlier just said, he was a ferocious driver. As he became blind, we didn't really realize he was going blind.
I did.
Mum did, we didn't. And he got increasingly dangerous until eventually we decided that he was too dangerous really to drive, and we started taking control of his vehicle whenever we were around. But I was driving this time. We were coming back to our house in Pretoria, and a car in front of me did a rather silly maneuver, and I crashed straight into the back of it. Mike and I both, without hesitation, jumped out to tell the woman that she was in the wrong. And she completely accepted that fact. I think largely not because of me, but because Mike had such a nice English accent, and would have convinced anyone that they were wrong, I think. And he was voluble in telling this poor woman that she was in the wrong. So we then drove off. But for me, those two vignettes, and many, many other things, summarize what we had in our lives for 20 years. Yeah, I'm going to raise a glass. As Mum said, it's not a
Celebration.
It is a celebration.
It is a celebration.
Yeah, it is. So to Michael.
Yeah.
To Michael.
Thank you so much, Martin. Mark Pollock, are you around to unmute yourself? I'm not quite sure.
Jane.
Mark Pollock, are you there?
Oh.
There you are. There's Mark. Great. Mark, I'm going to, you let me know, do you want me to show photos now or?
Well, I think nearer the end.
Okay.
It's going to be tough for me. Well, if I think about Uncle Mike, our relationship really wasn't much apart from his Christmas gifts that used to arrive every year from at least 50 years ago. And there was so much thought put into them that there's always this huge fight as to who was going to get what. And the funny sayings we had with every gift that were always the highlight of our Christmases. So with us living in South Africa, we only really got to see him on our not so frequent overseas visits. And then it turned out in 1998, he arrived for my mom's 70th and their golden wedding anniversary. So off we went to Treneries, and to our sort of surprise, there was Angela. So off we went, and the Saturday evening with the celebrations, long evening continued, and there was lots of wine drunk, and the Chicken Man dance came into its own, and the rest was history with Uncle Michael and Angela. So that's an evening I will never forget, and I'm sure Angela won't forget. And anyhow, the romance started, and they became an entity, and he decided to move to South Africa to live his African dream. So he purchased a home in Wynberg, and Angela moved from this flat to her new luxurious living, where she decided to feed the needy and the family, where we always used to walk up to his favorite Thai restaurant down the road. Then in 2015, Uncle Michael had this stroke. And I think Angela and I became close then, because we shared quite a lot. And my friend Johnny Edwards was very helpful. And I remember going to visit Uncle Mike at Constantia, frail care, in the fetal position, in the corner, in his bed, ready for death. And how they got him out of bed, I don't know, but I had to go through and have dinner with them at 5 o'clock with another 98-year-old. And the two of them couldn't understand each other because they both didn't know each other. They were nowhere. And if you think about that, he regained all his memories, all his stories, all his songs, all his fun things, and lived 5 amazing years. Then, with that stroke, it brought about them selling their home and moving to their retirement apartment looking into Table Mountain. And since getting that sad call from Martin, because I phoned Uncle Mark with my brother David on the Saturday and he couldn't speak to us, but just sent his love because he was not feeling that well. And I got the call from Martin, and I then thought it was time to reflect on all the good memories. And I loved Carol, my sister's one quote that she said, "I just loved the way Uncle Michael lived, in brackets, loved life. Everything to him was just funky but neat." Then Jessica, my daughter, who had a very close relationship with him in the end, doing her medical stuff. And when she graduated with her medical degree in December, I think it was Uncle Michael's last official outing, her cherished memory was him walking along the beach with his deck chairs and having about 5 breaks, which I had to stop with him because he battled to get there out of breath. And we put these 3 chairs down, and he ended up making the speech celebrating Jessica's graduation in song with all her friends who were in stitches of laughter. And as Jessica says, his love for family, celebration, and always having a good time, his endless generosity, and his humility to sit down on a chair a few times along the way, just so he could be with me.
So that he could be with me. And
then to end, Bronwyn sent a really nice message.
It's Carol's oldest daughter.
Where's Bronwyn? Bronwyn? And Bronwyn said, and this is how I'd like to end, and that's could you pick that picture up, Christine?
Certainly. Michael, not the Jessica picture yet, huh?
Oh, put that one up. That's the one when he came walking along the beach.
Okay, let's do the beach one first.
Yeah.
I'll do that. Oh, sorry, that's that's the one.
Other one.
Yeah, you put the other
okay.
one. Yeah, let me just get that.
The other one.
Yeah, sorry. Oops. We want that one.
That one, yeah.
That's it. We had the happiest day celebrating with champagne that I'll ever remember.
This is fine, please.
No.
This is fine.
So put the other one up, please, Christine, of Uncle Mike.
Certainly. I can just,
Just there's an arrow here.
no, sorry, wrong one here. Let me get,
Go back.
oops, beg your pardon. I'll get there in a second. I need to get to the picture first, sorry. I had it up here and I lost it for a second. Yeah.
That's right.
There we go.
Yeah.
This was taken when he was getting his Poets Society to sing along with him as the conductor of his poem. So I'd like us all to remember him larger than life. And Bronwyn's last message he sent, I thought was really fitting, where she said, my very first memory and meeting of Uncle Michael when I was in primary school, and we were staying in chalets on the water's edge in Neisner for my and Shirley's wedding. I was sitting on a bench near the water, and next to a bush with berries on it. I sat there picking and eating the berries when Uncle Mike came down to sit next to me. And he too picked some berries and was eating them whilst the two of us just looked at the beautiful view. I remember thinking to myself, wow, he's the coolest adult I know. Boy, did that turn out to be an accurate assumption.
Sweet.
Cheers to Uncle Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Bye.
Yep, to Mike. All right. My sister, Jane, are you ready to share? Can you unmute yourself?
Yep.
Mark.
So I was amused at a couple of the car stories from Uncle Michael because I remembered, and this is going to be hard for me too, but I remembered one where he was driving much too fast in the tiny curly roads in England and crashed through a yew hedge. And a police officer, you know, eventually came along and said to him, how fast do you think you were going? And Michael said, well, not too fast. And my understanding is he got let off from that. And then another time in Keeling, St. Mary, there's this tiny little river known fancifully as the River Jordan. And I was in the car with my dad, and I think my kids might have been there too. And the river was flooding. So the road actually had a little bit of water on it. And my dad said, we were in Uncle Michael's Mercedes. My dad said, I don't think you should drive through that. And Michael, who had this tension with my dad always, said, of course I can drive through it, drove through it, ruined the car, and it was in pieces for months. While they actually had to take the whole car apart, and bits of it were lying around for months until it could be repaired. The same car whose bumper I broke when I was having a fight with my dad, who was telling me what to do very sternly, and I was getting sick of being told what to do, and backed into a tree. That Mercedes sat in the Keeling St. Mary driveway for quite a long time, and my dad enjoyed driving it too. But the most formative part of my experience with him was when I was 11 years old. And I spent a couple of weeks in England by myself and stayed with him and did the veterinary thing, which was amazing to me and I simply loved. It was the first time I ever, you know, had my arm up to the shoulder inside a cow, feeling for whether the cow was pregnant or not, and watching and sometimes assisting with things like dehorning cattle and castrating them when they were young. And I loved all of it so much that for many, many years, my plan was to become a vet. And actually, I only turned into a human doctor by accident. On the other hand, all of that experience, both with animals and in later in my life observing animals, was extremely useful in my career as a psychiatrist. So he was definitely an extremely important person in my life growing up, and I'm sad to see him go, but as Angela said, he had certainly been suffering in his last years, and so it was a good time for him. And so I don't drink, but Michael did for sure, and I will raise a cup of tea.
To Mike.
To Mike.
Mike.
Thank you, Jane. All right, we're now open to anyone who would like to speak. So go ahead and unmute yourself, and it doesn't matter how short or long it is, just a little anything, just speak up and say who you are, your relationship to Mike.
Hi there, can I talk for a sec?
Yes, go ahead.
For those of you that don't know me, because I'm seeing all these new faces that I haven't really met before, and it's quite intriguing. I'm Dave, I'm the older brother, I'm Mark's older brother, and the older son of Anne. And I'm actually Michael's godson. And my first acquaintance really that I can recall with Michael was in England in 1972, when Enrico, my Italian friend, and I went to Europe for a 4-month holiday. I was at university at the time, and we came over to Guildford in Surrey, and we spent 10 days in Guildford. And we spent one night with Michael and Joe, and then Joe decided it wasn't a good idea to have us there. And Michael, you know, the generous man he was, he put us up in a little, it wasn't a hotel or B&B in those days because they weren't around in 1972, but it was a kind of a guest house, I guess. And he put us up at his expense, and he treated us like royalty. And I just want to clarify the story that Carol talked about, funky but neat, and where that came from. One evening, Michael and myself and Enrico were drinking port. We drank port from midnight till about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were all pretty sloshed. And we were watching a music video. And the chorus on this music video was, "Nice people, funky but neat." That is in 1972. And ever since then, whenever we greeted each other on the phone or saw each other, we used to start the sentence. He'd either do it or I would do it. We'd say, "Nice people," and the other person would finish with "funky but neat." And, you know, Michael has been a special part of our lives for I don't know how long. Unfortunately, Cape Town is a bit of a barrier. We didn't get there very often. Mark was fortunate with his profession. He was down there fairly often and got to know Angela and Mike much better. And it's just been an absolute privilege to know Uncle Mike from a closer level. We are going to miss Uncle Michael, but we will never forget him. He's a very, very special man, warm, generous. As they talked, his poetry, his sense of humor. He never seemed to get down. He was always on top of everything. And boy, did he enjoy a good scotch. But Uncle Mike will be missed. And Angela, our condolences from Lindsay and I. But we're going to see you some more. Don't worry, my girl. We're going to see you. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, David. All right, who else?
Well, I can share a similar greeting kind of story. I'm Richard's wife. I'm Ruth. The first time that we went to stay in Guildford when our son was 4, and we were staying in a National Trust, we were staying in a third of a mansion. The other people were staying in the other third of the mansion. And we're all in some, and so it's all, I think 10, all of Anna's family and my family, and then Richard, and then Mike and Joe, we're all crowded in some little pub and trying to unfold a OS land surveyor map in this tiny pub with all these people. And with each layer of being unfolded, one of us would say, "Oh, what a big map." And ever after that, for the next 20 or 30 years, whenever we saw each other, we would say, "Oh, what a big map, or whatever it was. Oh, what a big drink. Or, oh, what a big piece of chocolate cake.
Sweet. Thanks, Ruth. Thank you. Anyone else?
Right. Also, so when our son was really little, we would go and stay for 3 or 4 weeks in Guildford and travel around in the giant Merc. And so we learned a lot of songs from Mike. And one of them was, Abraham, he had 2 sons who sailed across the Vlay. Josephus was the name of one. No. Does anybody else know the song? Angela, do you know the song? Sailed across the Vlay. And then they go on a helicopter, or no, they go on an airplane. And then there was another one that went, oh, the Juja tree, the Juja tree. Never such a thing as a Juja tree. Late last night. Oh, I can't even remember how it goes now. To the bright blue sky, sailors say, if you're down that way from 2 till 3:30, you'll see things that don't seem true. If you don't believe me, then you know what you can do. You can keep on climbing, climbing, climbing up the Juja tree. Do none of you know this song? Thanks. We sang it a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. We're open for anybody else.
I'd just like to say it's so nice to see Anna and Lindsay. Of course, Lindsay, you're now married to Lindsay as well.
Yeah.
And I so recall us meeting you guys in England when we were a bit younger. Do you remember that? And anyway, it was quite surreal now that we can get together again. And it would be really great to see you guys again. So nice to see you, and I remember that visit so well.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We still have time if anyone else would like to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Simba. Go ahead.
So, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Angela's grandson. And much like my father said, Mike was very much a grandfather figure to Zara and myself, in the slightly younger generation, if you will. And my memories of Gran and Mike are largely focused on my time as a student in Cape Town, which I look back on really fondly now. And I'm very grateful in retrospect that, they were down the road for many, many reasons. I think a lot of people have mentioned, the sort of what I'll call Mike's irrepressible sort of positivity. And that was something that was definitely very welcome for me. And just having Gran and Mike down the road as a broke student was really lovely. And I'd often end up spending a night here and there visiting them as a sort of retreat from university life and that bubble, if you will, which was great, just from the lovely conversations we had, but also, for giving me a little bit more of a sense of perspective and being out of what at that sort of age seems like an all-encompassing world. And I think inherent to that grandparent-grandchild relationship is there's a little bit less pressure between those two generations. So I was very open with Gran and Mike about, you know, whatever ups and downs were going on in my personal life and university career, whatever the case may be. Certainly much more so than I was with my parents. So, you know, they filled a wonderful role, I'll say, in my life. And, you know, they got to meet some of the girlfriends that I had at the time, and the better ones of those were the ones who persuaded me to go and feed the hungry with my grandparents as well. So I look back on that time very, very fondly, and I'm very grateful that Gran and Mike were just down the road, and you know, were ready, much like Jessica's experience, I assume as well, to welcome me with open arms whenever I needed them.
Thank you so much, Simba. It's great to see you all.
Christine?
Yes.
I'd just like to say and just commend you guys, and Kurt, good to see you as well. And sorry, Michael, nice to see you as well. But thank you so much for putting this together. I do see you recording it, and I hope we're all going to get a share of that.
Certainly.
It's been certainly a very special evening for me. As I've said, Michael will never be forgotten.
Right.
He will always be remembered. A very, very special man.
You're absolutely right. Thank you, David.
Simba, didn't you have a good story with an April Fool's joke where you fooled Uncle Michael?
I don't know why that stayed with him so much, but yeah, I'm gonna, let me try my best to remember how it went. So I'd gotten drunk at a university party on a weekend night or whatever, and I think I'd foolishly made a bet with a friend that you know, embarrassingly, I could punch through something, and I fortunately failed miserably and injured one of my hands in the process. So I think the next day I was seeing Gran and Mike for lunch or something like that. So yeah, and it was obviously April the 1st, I think. So I just sort of thought of this off the cuff and told Mike that I'd spent the night in jail because I'd gotten into some kind of you know, a big bar fight or something. And I was quite astonished that for a little while they both bought it. And, you know, I sort of added more and more to this story to see how much more I could get away with until, you know, until it sounded totally ridiculous. But yeah, but it stayed with him for a long time, and I know that he liked telling that story for many years afterwards.
Yeah, he did.
Classic.
And Grant mentioned just now that he said he can't wait to go out there and buy a bottle of Lagavulin in memory of Uncle Mike. Angela. I said as long as he shares it with his mother.
Sweet. Wonderful. Anybody else?
Actually, I'm going to come back because of what Simba was talking about, because it reminded me of a very amusing tale that I remember from when I was about 15 years old, involving my dad. And we were in Spain at the time. My parents had an apartment there. And one evening, I decided, this was at the age of 15, that I was going to drink a bottle of brandy, a whole bottle. This was rot gut brandy called Esplendido, and which it most certainly was not. And so, and as I was sort of rather a nerdy young man, I decided I would keep a notebook and record my experiences as I went through it. So I started writing out, you know, I drank my first, you know, shot of brandy, and it feels pleasant, and I'm getting to get a little bit drunk, and Eventually, the writing just developed into a scrawl and then sort of dropped off the page completely. So at this point, I was really very, very, very drunk. And then, for reasons that I obviously have no memory of, my dad decided to take us all to the Playboy Club, which was just across the way, across actually a patch of desert is what it was across. So we all walked from the apartment to the Playboy Club, which apparently was most enjoyable for anyone who can remember the experience, but I have no recollection of it whatsoever. Actually, I have no recollection of anything else, but what I'm telling you, I was told the day after. So, about half an hour into the Playboy Club, I decided to make my appearance notable by throwing up all over one of the tables. So I did, and my dad thought maybe it would be a good thing if I went back to the flat and just lay down for a while. So we start to walk back across this little bit of scrubby desert back to the apartment. And halfway across, I indicate to my dad, again, this is all in the telling from him, that I needed to pee. So he said, okay, well, there's lots of little scrubby bushes here, you know, just find one and have a pee. And I'll just turn away while you do it. Not that it would have ever made any difference to me if he'd watched or not, but nonetheless. So there I was standing, peeing. And then Dad, who was just looking away, turned around, and I was gone. There was no sign of me. I had completely vanished. So where was I? He thought to himself. So he looked around a bit, and in a little hollow next to the bush, he found me prostrate, face down in the sand, where I just literally just fallen flat on my face. And he more or less picked me up, and I'm not sure if he carried me or if he guided me back to the apartment, but he did get me there, and I woke up the following day with the worst ever hangover I've ever had in my life. I didn't touch a drop of brandy for at least 4 years after that day. But it was just one of those really fun things that he was really good at. When he just loved that kind of aspect of partying and just enjoying wilder aspects of life, and it's one of those memories I do have, which I frequently tell to people because it's just such a fun experience. Which again, and it's all basically due to his retelling of it that I know it, and so it's his voice in my head when I think of the story. So I thought I'd just share that.
Oh, that was worth hearing. Thank you.
Okay.
It occurs to me that you and Anna might not know that Michael has a great niece who is just coming into the picture next to Asher. Asher, would you like to introduce Michael's great niece?
Well, her mother could probably do it better than
Tammy's there, yeah.
I'm Asher. This is Tammy. We are the children of Marita Keeling, Jane Keeling.
This is Imogen.
This is Imogen.
2 months old. Just 8 and then lost half of it.
Wonderful. We have not met Imogen in the flesh yet. I know Shani has. Shani was lucky to meet Imogen yesterday, but how lovely that Asher, who lives in our area in California, is visiting Tammy. And you both have memories of Michael. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to share anything, this would be the time.
Well, we were talking about it earlier, and I think one of the main things that stands out to us is, so after our grandmother died and our grandfather was alone in the old forge for 10 or so years, we never visited and didn't have a Michael there. And he was just he was a very positive force in Grandpa's life during what I think was a pretty hard time for him. And so it was always nice to know that he had Michael there looking out for him. And he was such a nice person to hang out with too. Like we really enjoyed him. We didn't know him much when we don't remember him much from when we were children, but when we were in our 20s and he was around, it was always really nice.
Right. Yes. Thanks for sharing, Tammy and Asher. Thank you so much. And
He's
baby
also
pigeon.
in Cape Town when Mom and I stopped there on our way to Madagascar.
Oh.
He and Angela showed us all around, and that was a really lovely trip for me and Mom.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Okay. All right. Maybe we're getting to the end. Anybody want to just a final couple of words to share?
I was reminded of some good memories of the reference to, sorry, by the way, I'm Kurt and Christine's daughter, Kate, in California. I was reminded of the time that our family visited the apartment in Spain in 2003, and I think there was a lot of fond memories from that trip, all made possible by Michael. We played a lot of bridge. We stayed up and had dinner at like 10 p.m., which I thought was amazing. My sister had her first nude beach experience.
Not her nudeness, but somebody else's.
Yes. But yeah, I think I decided on that trip that I was going to move to Spain and have an apartment there, and it was just the most wonderful time. And then obviously many visits at the Old Forge. We were just regaled with tales by Mike about his vet years, and just such a sense of humor that was always so warm and wonderful, and yeah, just great memories.
Thank you, Kate. All right. John Pollock, I see you there. Hi. Did you want to? I think John's trying to talk here.
You can
there you go.
Hey.
You
Hi,
can hear
John.
me, okay.
I see you
Yeah,
there.
hi, Christine. Yeah, okay. I'm John. I'm the number 3 in the Anne Pollock family, and this is my wife Jeanette next to me, who doesn't really want to be in the picture. But you know, it's hard for me to recollect much on Mike, because sadly I wasn't part of that side of the family, having been in the States, and he being in England for most of the time, and I didn't get to Cape Town very much. But my experiences of Mike are unbelievable. Such a kind, loving, generous guy, you know, and a fun guy to be around with. We were just very fortunate to have had Mike around, and of course having Angela there too was pretty cool. You know, I can remember the one time, might have been that time around the 50th wedding anniversary perhaps, and they stayed at my parents' house in the spare bedroom with a beautiful view looking down the valley over the sea. And I remember my mum saying, you know what, they're about 17, you know, I think they're still doing it. And I said, Mum, I said, that's love, Mum. So that is a memory. And you know, this whole experience today has been fantastic, because I don't know half of the people that I'm seeing here, and all the nice words that everyone said has actually been fantastic. And Richard, you may not remember me, but I have vague recollections of both you and Anna when we went over with my mum on the mail boat from East London, South Africa, in the Pendennis Castle. We went over to England to go and visit grandma and whatever, and we actually came over to your house. I was 5 years old, and I actually can remember you and your sister.
Oh, that's great. That's really great.
And your mum at the time, and otherwise I don't really know much about the rest of the Keeling family, or your side of the Keeling family. Right. But it has been a great experience, and thanks, Christine, for organizing this. And really, I've enjoyed listening to everyone. It's been great. And Angela, we're thinking of you. I'll give you a call next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah.
How do you do it?
Do I hear somebody trying to speak? Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah.
Just one final little thing, and it does seem a bit silly. If you have a look at that, who knows what that is?
Oh,
Shoehorn.
Yep. And then shoe tree.
Shoe tree.
Yeah. And that was given to me by Uncle Michael. So Richard, sorry for you. Because he knew that I loved shoe trees in my golf shoes.
Oh.
And those stay in my golf shoes permanently. So they will, and you screw them up to the size you want. They haven't got any corrosion. They're over 100 years old. I think they came from his father.
Wow.
So these stay in my shoes, my golf shoes.
Oh.
So I don't think I'll be forgetting Uncle Michael, even with my bad shots on the golf course. Yeah. I had a special relationship with your dad. I used to speak to him every single week for the last 10 years, I think.
I know.
Every week.
Yeah, it's been wonderful that you have. Yeah.
When my mother passed away, he was the last I could speak.
Yeah.
We spoke about sport, and more sport.
That's right. That's right enough.
And occasionally he shares that it collapsed, and then he got off it quickly.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a fabulous place to maybe bring this to a bit of a close. And I'm sure you've appreciated, as I've had, just all these memories and giving us just a fuller picture of Michael's life, and his legacy will endure. And it's sort of hearing this calls us to just value each day of our life even more, doesn't it? And think about our life and our legacy. And we'll always think of him, particularly at birthdays. As you heard, he was going to be 90 in September. We'll think of him every holiday, and I'm sure we'll think of him a lot in between, and certainly Angela and Richard and Anna will. Angela and I talked about how to close this, and we felt it appropriate to use some words that have often been recalled at this time. The 23rd Psalm is a poetic expression of what we think Michael is now kind of experiencing in its fullness. So please listen as I read this now. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in and helping to celebrate Mike and remember him and just share these memories. And I think let's all reflect on our own lives and our relationships, and we'll be the better for it. We'll all have a legacy. So yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much. I'm glad the technology worked and all three continents got together, and all this family that, as David said, we don't often do this. I've done some screenshots, so I can send out as much as I can, plus the recording, and yeah, the slideshow as well. If anybody wants photos that they saw that they would like, particularly you, Richard and Anna, I'm happy to share anything. So thanks very much, and you guys, everybody.
Thank you on behalf of everybody.
Yes, thank you, Christine.
Thanks very much, Christine.
Pleasure. It's been a great honor. He was an amazing man, and we've had the laughter, we've had the tears, and I know
I just want to say thank you very much.
And
I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for this lovely send-off.
Thank
for
you.
Our very much loved Mike.
Yeah. And I don't know, Angela, do you want to tell people, you've told me what you might be thinking about with his ashes?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Well, we're thinking of waiting until, obviously we can't do much at the moment because we're all shut up.
Right.
But we're thinking, we've got his ashes. He was cremated a couple of days ago. And here are his ashes.
Aww.
Really heavy.
Yeah.
And what I want to do, and I think he would approve thoroughly, is when we're free again, I want to take them to Kirstenbosch. And I want to illegally scatter him
Yeah, that's a wonderful
And
idea.
then have a lunch for anybody who would like to come. So if any of you want to be there, we would be so happy.
How lovely. That's lovely.
I don't know when it'll be.
Yeah.
It certainly won't be for a couple of months. More
Probably late this year.
It'll probably be near Christmas.
Right. I think that's a beautiful idea. Mm-hmm.
It'll be our permanent memory.
Right. Right.
Of a lovely man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I included some flower photos from Kirstenbosch in the PowerPoint, as you saw, because I just knew how important Kirstenbosch was to him. So that's a lovely, lovely thought. So, all right. So thank you so much, everybody. God bless. Take care. Keep safe. Keep healthy.
Right.
Bye for now. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks very much.